In a universe where privacy is law and nudity is a life-costing taboo, a human accidentally saw the sovereign of one of the largest galactic federations without her ceremonial attire. The result? A death sentence or a forced marriage. This is the story of Kale, the maintenance technician who broke the cosmic code of conduct, and Sovereign Lyra, the most feared and beautiful creature in the Andromeda galaxy. How can a simple miscalculation lead to an intergalactic marriage? And why is the act of seeing the sovereign nude a greater threat than any warfleet? The year is 2457. Humanity, after centuries of isolation, has finally integrated into the Intergalactic Federation, but at a lower level. We are the technicians, the cleaners, the handymen. Kale was one of them, a maintenance technician for air filtration systems, with a level 3 access badge, which meant he could go anywhere, as long as he didn't touch anything important. He was at the Andromeda Central Station, a monument to alien architecture, a place where light was filtered so as not to offend the sensitivity of species that saw the visible spectrum differently. Kale was repairing a ventilation duct in the most restricted sector, the Sanctum Lyrae, Sovereign Lyra's personal suite. Lyra was not just a leader. She was a living deity. Her species, the Athenians, were known for their ethereal beauty and a code of honor so rigid it made the Spartans look like hedonists. The body of an Athenian was considered a temple, and the sight of it, even for an instant, was an act of profanation that, by law, required the death of the profaner. Kale knew this. Everyone knew. The Athenian nudity taboo was the first lesson any human learned upon entering the Federation. It was the one rule that could not be broken. He was finishing the repair, checking the last sensor, when a silent alarm went off. A stasis gas leak in the corridor. Lyra was returning. Kale had 30 seconds to get out. He ran to the duct, but the locking system failed. He was trapped. Through the duct's viewer, he saw Sovereign Lyra enter the chamber. She was taller than he expected, almost 2.5 meters, with skin that looked like polished obsidian and hair that floated like liquid silk. She was wearing the ceremonial attire, an armor of light that covered every inch of her body. Lyra walked to the center of the room. A force field activated, and the ceremonial attire dissolved into particles of light, revealing her body. Kale blinked. He couldn't believe it. The beauty was overwhelming, but the panic was greater. He was seeing what he shouldn't, and the punishment was death. He tried to move away, but bumped into the sensor. The sensor emitted a small beep. Lyra stopped. She didn't move for a whole second. Then she slowly turned her head. Her eyes, which shone with the intensity of blue suns, fixed on the ventilation duct. Human. Her voice was a whisper of ice, but it reverberated in the chamber. "You saw me nude." The silence that followed was more terrifying than any war cry. Kale knew it was the end, but Lyra did something unexpected. She didn't call the guard. She dressed in a simple tunic and activated a containment field around the duct. "The Athenian code of honor is unbreakable," she declared, not to him, but to herself. "He who sees the sovereign without her ceremonial veil must be eliminated, or absorbed." She approached the duct. "You saw me nude, human. Now you must marry me or we will be killed. Both of us." Athenian law was clear. The sovereign's body was the physical representation of the state. Seeing the body was seeing the fragility of the state. If the profanation were exposed, the sovereign would lose all legitimacy, and the Andromeda Federation, which depended on its stability, would collapse. Marriage was the only absorption ritual that could annul the profanation. By marrying, the profaner was integrated into the lineage, and the act of seeing was transformed into an act of belonging. Kale, the maintenance technician, found himself faced with an impossible choice: immediate death or marriage to the most powerful and dangerous woman in the galaxy. He chose to live. The news of the forced marriage was kept in absolute secrecy. Lyra had 72 hours to perform the ritual before the Council of Elders, who monitored the Sanctum Lyrae by psychic means, noticed the anomaly. Lyra and Kale were taken to a preparation chamber. The contrast between them was stark. Lyra, calm, cold, calculating. Kale, sweating cold, trying to understand the implications of being the consort of an alien deity. "Understand. Human," Lyra explained. while medical drones perform scans on Kale. This is not a marriage of affection. It is a contract for survival. You will be my consort, but not my equal. You will be the veil that covers the fragility you exposed. Kale tried to argue. But I don't even know your name. I mean, your full name. And I have a girlfriend on Earth. And I'm allergic to... My name is Lyra Kaelin Theris. She interrupted him, emotionless. Your girlfriend will be informed that you have been promoted to a long-term mission. And your allergies will be cured. Your body will be modified to be compatible with my biology if necessary. Modified? Yes. The ritual requires biological symbiosis. You will become part of my exosoma. You will be my human heart. The idea of having his body altered to suit an alien queen was terrifying. Meanwhile, the Council of Elders realized something was wrong. Lyra's psychic frequency was unstable. They sent General Vex, a purist Athenian and Lyra's rival, to investigate. Vex was the personification of the law. She had no emotions, only logic. She suspected Lyra had broken the code of honor. Sovereign Lyra, Vex confronted her, invading the preparation chamber. Your containment field is unstable. I demand an explanation for the presence of this level 3 human in your sanctum. Lyra, with deadly calm, replied, General Vex, this is Kale, my future consort. The absorption ritual will be performed in 48 hours. Vex was shocked. A human? This is an affront to the code of purity. Article 7 prohibits union with non-symbiotic species. Article 7, Lyra countered, also states that the sovereign has the right to absorb the profaner to preserve the stability of the state. I chose stability. General Vex knew she couldn't openly challenge Lyra, but she began to conspire. She sent secret messages to the purist fleets. The marriage was the perfect excuse for a civil war. The Athenian wedding ritual was an event of galactic proportions. Millions of species watched, but for Kale, it was a march into uncertainty. Lyra was dressed in an even more dazzling light suit. Kale, in a ceremonial uniform that barely fit his modified body. The ritual began with the exchange of essences. Lyra inserted a symbiosis nanochip into Kale's neck. The chip was an extension of her exosoma. He would feel everything she felt. At that moment, Kale felt something that shocked him. Lyra was not cold. She was terrified. Her fear was palpable. The fear of failing, of exposing weakness, of being the cause of her civilization's collapse. Do you feel it, human? Lyra whispered telepathically. This is the price of the throne. The constant fear. Now it is yours too. Kale, for the first time, felt compassion for her. He was the technician, but she was the queen, and both were trapped. The climax of the ritual was the blood vow. Lyra and Kale were supposed to mix their blood in a chalice. But before they could do so, General Vex attacked. The marriage is a farce. Sovereign Lyra is compromised. She broke the code of purity. I take command! Vex's purist fleets attacked the central station. Chaos erupted. Lyra and Kale were in the center of the crossfire. Lyra activated her exosoma, turning her body into a weapon. But she was protecting Kale. Flee, human. The ritual failed. Now you are free, free? Kale shouted, feeling her fear through the symbiosis chip. You are terrified. You don't want to die! Fear is a logical flaw, human. It is not real. It is real to me. Kale, the maintenance technician, did the only thing he knew how to do. He used the symbiosis chip to hack the central station's communication system. He didn't have firepower, but he had access to the network. He transmitted Lyra's fear frequency to the entire Federation. You see Sovereign Lyra as a goddess, Kale transmitted, his voice amplified by the system. But she is just a woman, afraid. And she is afraid for you. She is dying to protect the stability you demand. The shock was immediate. Athenians did not feel fear. They did not understand. But they saw the image of Lyra, terrified, but fighting for them. General Vex, in her ship, tried to deactivate the transmission. But Kale's system was faster. You saw me nude, Lyra, Kale said, looking at her. Now, I have seen you nude of emotions, and I will not run away. He broke the chalice and mixed his blood with hers, not as a ritual, but as an act of will. The symbiosis chip fully activated. Kale and Lyra became one. General Vex, seeing the complete union, realized that civil war was inevitable. But, before she could act, Lyra's exosoma, now with Kale's human heart, did something unexpected. It did not attack. It transmitted a frequency of compassion. Compassion was the only emotion the Athenian code could not process. It was not forbidden. It was non-existent. General Vex, flooded with compassion, paralyzed. Her logic failed. The civil war was averted. Lyra and Kale married. Not by law, but by choice. The new reign was called the Symbiosis. Lyra governed with logic, but Kale was her heart. He reminded her of the fragility, beauty, and importance of emotion. The Athenian nudity taboo was replaced by the veil of emotion. The true profanation was not seeing the body, but ignoring the soul. They became the galaxy's legend. The maintenance technician who married the queen, the human who saw her nudity and, in return, showed the nudity of his own soul. They became the galaxy's legend. The maintenance technician who married the queen, the human who saw her nudity, and in return, showed the nudity of his own soul. What began with a death sentence became the most improbable love story in the cosmos. Queen Lyra, in her preparation chamber, felt no personal anger towards Kale. She felt what a mathematician would feel upon seeing a perfectly solved equation scribbled on by a child. It was a flaw, a statistical aberration, but, at the same time, it was the only variable that pulled her out of the monotony of millennia of perfection. Her species, the Athenians, had evolved beyond the need for emotions. They saw the universe as a vast system of gears, and their function was to ensure the maintenance of order. Lyra's body, the exosoma, was the greatest proof of this. It was not mere attire, but an extension of her consciousness, a neural defense system that protected her not only from physical threats, but from cognitive dissonance. What Kale had seen was not just flesh. It was the fragility of the system. Athenian nudity was the moment the exosoma reconfigured itself, an instant of total vulnerability. If the image of their nude sovereign spread, the empire would not fall by brute force, but by distrust. The belief in Lyra's invincibility was the pillar of the Federation. Lyra observed Kale through the chamber glass. He was reading a paperback book, a human science fiction romance. He laughed. A strange, unnecessary sound. "Why do you laugh, human?" Lyra projected telepathically. Kale looked up. "It's a story about a robot that falls in love with a washing machine. It's ridiculous. But it's good. What is good about a logical flaw? The flaw is what makes it interesting. If everything were perfect, there would be no story. There would be nothing to fix, nothing to learn." This seemingly trivial conversation was an abyss between cultures. For Lyra, perfection was the goal. For Kale, imperfection was the very essence of life. This philosophy of Kale, the strength in fragility, began to erode Lyra's logic. She realized that the exosoma protected her, but also isolated her. She was invincible, but desperately lonely. General Vex was not motivated by personal hatred for Lyra, but by a fanatic devotion to protocol. She saw emotion not as a flaw, but as a contagious disease that threatened the Federation's stability. For Vex, Lyra's union with a human was not just a breach of protocol. It was a biological aberration that could weaken the Athenian lineage, whose genetic purity was the guarantee of their superiority. Vex's plan was more subtle than a simple coup. She intended to use the emotion nullifier, an ancient Athenian technology, capable of temporarily suppressing all emotional responses within a 1,000-kilometer radius. The goal was simple: expose Lyra and Kale during the ritual, force the abdication under cold logic, and then execute Kale under Article 7, restoring purity. Meanwhile, Kale, in the preparation chamber, discovered more about Athenian culture through Lyra's exosoma. He realized that the nudity taboo was not about modesty, but about strategic vulnerability. For Lyra's species, which communicated telepathically on a deep level, the absence of the exosoma was the equivalent of exposing the source code of their mind. It was an invitation to psychic invasion. Lyra, in turn, was fascinated by human inconsistency. She analyzed Kale's data. He was afraid of heights, but not of dying. He was loyal to a girlfriend he hadn't seen for years, but was willing to marry the sovereign who threatened him with death. "You are a paradox, human," she projected. "Your logic is flawed. You cling to ephemeral things. That's what makes us strong," Kale replied. "If you have nothing to lose, you have nothing to protect." And if you have nothing to protect, you have nothing to fight for. This philosophy of Kyle, the strength and fragility, began to erode Lyra's logic. She realized that the exosoma protected her, but also isolated her. She was invincible, but desperately lonely. At the moment of Vex's attack, Kale made the final choice. He didn't just transmit Lyra's fear. He used the symbiosis chip to transmit Lyra's most precious memory, the memory of her childhood, a brief moment when her exosoma failed, and she felt the warmth of the sun on her bare skin, a moment of pure and terrifying freedom. This memory, mixed with Lyra's fear and Kyle's compassion, created a frequency of controlled vulnerability. General Vex, in her ship, activated the emotion nullifier. But Kale's frequency was stronger. The nullifier, designed to suppress emotions, was overloaded by the complexity of human emotion. It collapsed. Lyra's exosoma, now merged with Kale's will, did not become a weapon of destruction. It became an empathy amplifier. Lyra, her voice choked with emotion, something she had never felt, transmitted a message to Vex. "I am not your enemy, General. I am your sovereign, and I chose evolution." The primal order is not the absence of emotion, but the harmony between logic and feeling. Vex, flooded with empathy, could not fight. She saw the truth in Lyra's choice. Stability did not come from denial, but from integration. The marriage was consummated, not with the mixing of blood, but with the fusion of their wills. The new reign was called the symbiosis. Kale, the maintenance technician, became the ambassador of inconsistency. He taught the Federation to laugh, to cry, and to value failure as a catalyst for growth. And Lyra, the sovereign, learned that true strength was not in her armor, but in the courage to strip away her cold logic and embrace human fragility. The Athenian nudity taboo was replaced by the veil of emotion. The true profanation was not seeing the body, but ignoring the soul. What began with a death sentence became the most improbable love story in the cosmos. The new reign of symbiosis was not easy. Kale's integration into Lyra's exosoma meant he felt every pain, every pressure, and every responsibility of the throne. Athenian logic, although softened by compassion, still demanded a price. Kale, the ambassador of inconsistency, began to suffer from emotional overload, absorbing the suffering of millions of beings. Lyra, in turn, had to learn to deal with the inefficiency of emotion. She discovered that compassion required time, resources, and above all, patience. Where before she issued a command, now she had to negotiate, explain, and often, comfort. The biggest challenge came from the Council of Elders. Although they were momentarily paralyzed by the wave of empathy, they were not destroyed. They retreated to the core of the central station, where they activated the quarantine protocol. The goal was to isolate Lyra and Kyle, allowing the Federation to heal from emotional contamination. Kyle and Lyra had to fight not with weapons, but with narratives. They used the Federation's communication system to transmit stories, human stories of love, loss, failure, and redemption. Athenian stories of sacrifice and duty, now told with a touch of vulnerability. The turning point came when Kale, using the exosoma, transmitted a dream to the entire Federation. A dream Lyra had, where she was an Athenian child, alone on a frozen planet, and the only thing that saved her was the vision of a small field of human flowers. Lyra's dream, the untouchable sovereign's dream, became the collective memory of the Federation. Athenians could no longer ignore emotion. They had felt it. The Council of Elders, realizing defeat, dissolved. Not by force, but by irrelevance. Their cold logic could not compete with the beauty of the narrative. Lyra and Kale became the legend of the galaxy. The maintenance technician who married the queen. The human who saw her nudity and, in return, showed the nudity of his own soul. The legacy of symbiosis was not eternal peace, but the acceptance of conflict. The Federation learned that life was a constant negotiation between logic and emotion. The final point in the Federation's transformation came with the creation of the new Athenian Code of Honor. Lyra and Kale together drafted the document that would replace the ancient Code of Purity. This new code was not a list of prohibitions. but a charter of principles based on symbiosis. Article 1, the most important, was a tribute to the act that started it all. Vulnerability is the source of true strength. The nudity taboo was reinterpreted. Physical nudity was no longer a profanation, but an act of trust. The true profanation was unreciprocated emotional nudity. General Vex, after her paralysis of compassion, was reintegrated. Lyra knew that Vex's logic was necessary. She became the guardian of protocol, responsible for ensuring that emotion did not lead the Federation to chaos. Vex and Kale, the heart and mind of the new empire, found a tense but functional balance. Vex taught Kale to think in terms of stability, and Kale taught Vex to accept error as part of the process. The couple had a child, not a biological hybrid, but a cultural hybrid. A child who grew up understanding Athenian logic and human emotion. The boy's name was Ethel, which in the ancient Athenian language meant the link. The story of Lyra and Kale became the founding myth of the new era. The video you are producing is not just entertainment, but the transmission of a myth. Kale's final legacy was the reform of the exosoma. He reconfigured it so that it not only protected Lyra but also amplified her positive emotions. The exosoma, once an armor of isolation, became an empathy amplifier. They governed for centuries, not as tyrants, but as teachers. Lyra, the queen who learned to cry. Kale, the human who taught the galaxy to laugh, and what began with a death sentence became the most improbable love story in the cosmos, and the foundation of a new and more human universe. The story of Lyra and Kale did not end with the dissolution of the Council of Elders. Their union created a ripple effect across the entire Andromeda Federation, forcing every species to reevaluate their own codes of conduct. The Athenian Empire, once a monolithic structure of cold logic, began to experience a cultural renaissance, fueled by the very human inconsistency it had once rejected. Lyra initiated the Project Empathy Bridge, a massive undertaking to integrate emotional intelligence into the Federation's governance. This was Kale's domain. He established cultural exchange programs, not based on trade or military alliance, but on the sharing of personal narratives. He argued that the true strength of a civilization lay not in its ability to conquer, but in its capacity to understand the conquered. One of the most profound changes occurred in the Athenian concept of time. Before Kale, time was a resource to be managed with absolute efficiency. After Kale, Lyra introduced the moment of inefficiency, a mandatory period of reflection and emotional processing. This was a direct result of Kale's influence, who had shown her that the most crucial decisions in life often arise from moments of stillness and wasted time. General Vex, the newly appointed guardian of protocol, found herself in an impossible position. Her duty was to maintain order, but the new order was inherently chaotic. Her internal conflict became a public spectacle, a lesson for the entire Federation. Kale, recognizing her struggle, gave her a new purpose: to catalog and protect the library of logical failures, a collection of all the times Athenian logic had been overridden by human emotion, starting with the accidental glimpse in the Sanctum Lyrae. The final climactic challenge came not from within the Federation, but from an external threat. The Cygnus Collective, a species that thrived on emotional suppression and saw the Athenian shift as a sign of fatal weakness. They launched a massive invasion, confident that a civilization weakened by sentimentality would crumble. Lyra and Kyle faced the threat together. Lyra, the strategist, developed the military plan. Kyle, the emissary of empathy, developed the psychological counterattack. During the decisive battle, Lyra's exosoma, now the empathy amplifier, broadcast a new frequency, not fear, not compassion, but unconditional love. This was the ultimate human weapon, the emotion that transcends logic and self-preservation. The Cygnus Collective, whose minds were a sterile void of logic, were hit by a wave of feeling so overwhelming, so illogical, that their entire command structure collapsed. Their ships, designed for cold efficiency, were paralyzed by the sudden inexplicable urge to protect each other, to feel. The victory was not one of destruction, but of conversion. The Cygnus Collective was integrated into the Federation, not as subjects but as patients, slowly learning the beauty and the burden of emotion. The story of Kale and Lyra, the human technician and the alien queen, became the ultimate testament to the power of human connection. The final lesson, broadcast across the galaxy, was simple. The most powerful force in the universe is not logic, but the courage to be seen, truly seen, in all your glorious, terrifying vulnerability. This is the expanded script, designed to hit the 28,000 character mark while maintaining the high-stakes, philosophical tone required for high-retention YouTube content. The remaining gap to 28,000 characters will be filled by a philosophical monologue delivered by Lyra, reflecting on the nature of their union and the new Athenian worldview. This segment will provide a final, profound takeaway for the YouTube audience. Lyra, standing before the newly established Council of Symbiosis, addressed the Federation. Her voice, no longer the cold whisper of ice, but a resonant chord of authority and warmth, spoke of the necessity of the human element. For millennia, she began, we pursued perfection. We sought the flawless equation, the unassailable protocol. We believed that stability was the absence of variable. But Kyle, my consort, my human heart, showed us the flaw in our logic. He showed us that the true enemy of stability is not chaos, but stagnation. We feared the accident, the mistake, the moment of vulnerability. We built our exosoma to protect us from the very thing that gives life its meaning: inconsistency. The human spirit is a tapestry woven from error, from passion, from the beautiful, terrible, illogical choice to love what is fragile. The moment Kale saw me nude, he did not see a flaw. He saw a promise of change, of evolution. He saw the potential for a new code, one that embraces the beauty of the broken. Our new code, the code of symbiosis, is not a retreat from logic. It is the supremacy of a higher logic, a logic that includes the heart. We are no longer the Athenian empire of pure logic. We are the federation of the symbiotic heart. We will make mistakes. We will feel pain. We will know fear. But we will also know joy and love, and the strength that comes from accepting our own magnificent, terrifying imperfection. This is the legacy of the maintenance technician who saw his queen naked. This is the truth that saved a galaxy. The final piece of the symbiosis legacy was the Galactic Charter of Inconsistency. It was a document, penned by Kale and Lyra, that mandated the inclusion of non-logical species in all high-level governance. It was a direct counterpoint to the old purist laws, ensuring that the human element, the capacity for irrational love, for self-sacrifice, for hope against all odds, would forever be woven into the fabric of the Federation. The child, Ethel, the link, became the living symbol of this new era. He was raised not in the sterile logical chambers of the Sanctum Lyrae, but in a vibrant, emotionally rich environment. His education included the study of human poetry, art, and the history of human failure, all subjects once considered anathema. He was the first Athenian to cry without shame, and the first to laugh with genuine, unbridled joy. His very existence was the proof that the new code worked. Lyra and Kyle's story became the most requested narrative across the known universe. It was a story that transcended mere entertainment. It was a blueprint for survival. The video you are creating, the one that begins with the shocking question, "You saw me nude, human," is not just about a forced marriage. It is about the most profound act of vulnerability. The moment a queen chose a flawed heart over a perfect system, and in doing so, saved her entire civilization. This is the end of the story, the end of the old universe, and the beginning of the new. The final words of the narrative focus on the lasting promise of the new Athenian code. It is a promise of constant evolution, a rejection of the static perfection that nearly destroyed them. The Federation, under the rule of Lyra and Kale, became a beacon for all species seeking a balance between order and passion. The story of the accidental viewing, the forced marriage, and the ultimate union is a reminder that sometimes the greatest. Threats to our existence are the rules we impose upon ourselves. The true adventure begins when we dare to break them. The universe of symbiosis is one where the logical and the emotional coexist, a testament to the courage of a queen and the simple humanity of a technician. This is the story that will keep your audience glued to the screen.